Don't you ever let go. Don't you ever let go.
Yes, hold on. Don't you ever let go. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Why should you hold on? Because he's great. Because he is great. And he's greatly to be praised. This
Yes,
song
he
right
is.
here. I was in California. I was working with Warren Campbell, a friend of mine, married to Erica Campbell, Mary. He was just there. We were talking about singing on their record. Sing! Say your name! Say your name!
All right, blessings on your life this morning. God bless you. God bless you. God bless everybody today. Another glorious day that the Lord has made, and we are going to rejoice and be glad in it. I didn't get a chance to cue Dr. Fred Hammond up the way I wanted to. I thought I had him in the right spot, but obviously I did not. That's okay. We're going to go on with our regular scheduled worship service. Anywho. Yeah. So I hope everybody's doing well. This is your second time seeing me today, this morning. And so I did a live earlier, and we're going to do another one here. This is our regular, supposedly 9 o'clock, and I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I may switch it up a little bit and just do one service since I'm doing the lives. And most people just kind of tune in to my lives when they go back and listen to it, because I really don't have a lot of folks that come on at the 9 o'clock hour. And definitely I don't have nobody coming on at 6 o'clock. So I'm praying about that, to figure out which way to go with that whole thing. To just do maybe one or keep it as is. I don't know yet. But nevertheless, we're here. And on last week, we were talking about the timeline of Jesus Christ and the criticality of that based upon where we are today on the timeline. So it's not just about Jesus, it's about Jesus as it relates to us, with respect to us. And so we are going to continue down that path. Where we left off last week was we left off at the 69th week, or the 483rd year. That's where we left off. And I went back and I doubled up on that because I felt like the first message that I gave, it needed some more clarification from last Wednesday. And so I came back on Thursday and I brushed that up a little bit so you could, hear it more fully and more clearly. And so that's what we did. And so what I want to do today is just go back and just recap for 1 minute where we left off on that 69th week, because now the question that you should have is what does the 7 year or the 1 week that we have left after the 69th week? Because remember, the whole prophecy covers a 70-week span, which is a total of 490 years. So we've already covered 483 years, because after that, the cross came, the crucifixion came. So now we have this 1 week. Before we get to this 1 week, we have the church age, or this mystery age, the Holy Ghost age. So we have that space in there. That space is not included in the calculations. So we have this 1 week, and I just want to give you this piece, and then we'll go into our lesson today. And so with that, the 7-week period, because people want to know, well, how will we know when the 1 week, I'm not 7 week, but the 1 week, or the 7 years, how will we know when it starts? So according to Daniel 9:27, this is the reason why I say it is not the rapture, it is the return of Jesus Christ to reign on the earth for 1,000 years, the millennium, right? And so that is found. One of the places it's found is in Daniel 9:27, and it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant," and he is the Antichrist. So when the Antichrist comes back to confirm, that is a signing. Confirm means to sign, to come into an agreement. Okay, so what Israel right now is waiting on is, this is the last thing that they're waiting on, is the peace agreement, the peace treaty to be signed. Once that happens, then the clock starts again. Remember, we actually had 3 clocks. We had the clock from the decree of Artaxerxes, King Artaxerxes, to go back and to rebuild. That's when the clock started. Then the clock stopped at the year Jubilee. Then it started again on the 62 weeks, and then it stopped at the church age, and then it starts back again at the last week, or the 7-year period. And so the 7-year period starts when the peace treaty is signed in Israel. That's when that starts. So at that point, you can count from there 7 years. I'm talking about 7 regular years, because 1 day is equal a year, again, according to Genesis, the 29th chapter, when we talked about Laban and Jacob. Okay, I won't go back and deal with all that. So it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week." That's that last and final week that we've been talking about. "And in the midst of the week," now this is halfway, so 3.5 years into that particular week, "he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease." That means that's the sacrifices, that the oblation, what they do in the temple, he's going to cause that to cease. And I made mention of that last week. Why is he going to cause it to cease? Because he wants you to understand that there's no need for you to sacrifice to Jesus, which the Jews was all off anyway, because they missed Jesus coming the first time when he came and he died on the cross. And I mentioned that a lot of them did not recognize that, because they was in their own feelings and in their own interpretation. And they thought that King Jesus would come back and reign as the Messiah, the King, the way that they felt that he should in their head. So to them, they're still waiting on the Messiah to come. Now, when the Antichrist comes, he's going to look and act and do the things that they want him to do. And so that's how a lot of that's going to be won over, is because of the behavior of the Antichrist, which is going to look like the real Christ, but it's a farce. It's false. Okay. So he's going to call in the middle of the week for the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and the determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So I just wanted to give you that in terms of a recap from last week, or more of clarification from last week, and going into this week. And I hope that piece will help you a little bit. We are still talking about the timeline of Jesus Christ's return. And in that timeline, it's critical because you are on there. And so we're going to spend some time in Daniel 2 today, because all this is going to be congruent with the timeline. And I got this, it's parallel. It all syncs up. So I need you to follow me with my rhetoric. So we talked about the first part. So we got part number 1 out of the way, and we dealt with the calculations. Now we're going to move into Daniel number 2, and we're going to deal with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, because Nebuchadnezzar's dream is critical. And I'm going to show you another part where I'm going to match up the timeline, as we talked about on last week, with the king's dream that we're going to talk about this week. And hopefully we can get through that. If we don't get through that, we'll conclude that part at a later time next week. So, just for the sake of brevity, what I want to do, because I am going to miss a whole lot of nuggets in here. There's a lot of lessons that I'm going to skip over only because I'm trying, my objective is to get you to understand the timeline, especially as it relates to the church, the era in which we live in right now, and how soon it is, the potential of Christ's return. Okay. And I want you to see that, because a lot of people don't teach it. And it's kind of outside your thinking realm. People don't think to consider that. Actually, they think that, we're going to be here forever. And if they don't think like that, they act like that. So I want to debunk that, and I want to kind of reel this in and bring it into some perspective. So I'm going to skip through. I'm just going to give you off the top of my head a little overview on this Daniel number 2 before we get into the interpretation of the dream. Once we get there, then I'll actually start to go through the scripture. So it starts off in Daniel number 2, and we're actually going from chapter number 2, verse 1, all the way to verse 35, and I'll narrate that just a little bit so you can kind of understand. Go back at your leisure and read this, because it is powerful. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he has dreams. He has these dreams, and in these dreams, one dream in particular, the scripture talks about that it troubled him. It troubled him. So a nugget to go with that is that whenever you have a dream and it's uncommon, it's unlike a lot of your other dreams, and you can kind of see that. And if there's a dream that becomes disturbing to you, where you can't get away from it, you need to take note of. However, so Nebuchadnezzar, he has this particular dream. As he's dreaming, he wakes up and he's got a staff of people. Now understand, the king is political, right? He's not on the spiritual end of things, but he has people around him that are spiritual. So he calls on these people that are around him. They're basically sorcerers and soothsayers and all that kind of stuff. And he calls them in, and he asks them, he says, I had a dream last night. And with this dream, I need you to tell me, give me the interpretation of this dream. So those guys, they say to him, well, will tell us what the dream is, and we will give you the interpretation. I wish I could break this down, because in this alone, I could preach it. So Nebuchadnezzar is very sharp. So he says, no, y'all basically on my payroll, and this is y'all's job. Y'all supposed to be able to see into the spirit realm. Which is a lesson learned, because a lot of times when y'all going in these lines, and the prophet he said, well, tell me, is there anybody in your family by the name of John? Who is John? I hear the name John. And so when you're giving them everything that they want, then according to scripture here, Nebuchadnezzar, in this, the narrative, it shows where if you do that, then the soothsayers can interpret the dream, but they put what they want to the dream, right? And so when you get finished, they do have a spiritual side to them. So the devil is feeding them certain information, but the devil is not all knowing. He's not omnipresent. Okay, so he doesn't know everything. So anyway, he says to them, he says, no, this ain't how we gonna do this right here. He says, I want you to tell me what I dream. Now, y'all bad, y'all spiritual, tell me what I dream. Now, so they go on and they say, well, listen, that you ask a hard thing. You ask a real hard thing. How we gonna tell you what you dream if you don't give us the dream? Now, this right here should show you the disparity and the separation between the real church or the real people of God versus the false people of God. Because, see, God ain't scared. God ain't scared. So now you got the world out there trying to act like, that they got this and they got that. But then when the king, which is of the world too, but he's serious now, and he says, no, I need some answers to this dream because I'm disturbed, and I got y'all on payroll. You know how y'all do give you $50, $100, $200, $1,000, you know, in the plate. You know how you do. So anyway, he said, no, I'm paying y'all. So since I'm paying y'all, you're going to tell me accurately what I dreamed. So they come to the conclusion and they say, no, we ain't going to be able to do that. They say, ain't nobody, no earthly man can do that. The only people that would be able to do that, they got to be from out of this world. They got to be gods. They got to be gods. So the king, he sends out an edict. He says, I'm gonna kill all of them because they fakes. They can't do their job. And so with that, you got Daniel, which Daniel was not present. So they went out. I forget the servant's name. It starts with an A. But he sends them on this quest, and he sets the time up. He says, I'm killing all y'all spiritual people because y'all, this ain't nothing but this is some voodoo stuff, and this ain't even real. So Daniel gets word of this. So when he gets word of, he says, oh, pump your brakes, player, pump your brakes. He said, no, wait a minute, I know a God. So long story short, Daniel finds favor with the person that Nebuchadnezzar sends out to execute, to do the executions for all the spiritual people. And he says, hold on. He says, before you do all that, he says, I give me a minute, and I got to seek God. When I seek God, I'll be back. And so he gave him a little bit of time, and he says, no, tell the king that I know the interpretation of the dream. Now with that, and he also pleaded, or he stood in the gap for the other folks. Why am I saying that? Lesson to be learned right here is that without the real people of God, a lot of what's going on right now with the fakes, a lot of them would not be where they are right now if it wasn't for a real man or woman of God standing in the gap on their behalf. When you read that narrative, what you will discover was it was because of Daniel's plea not to have them killed. So not only did he get the interpretation from God and be able to tell the dream, but with that, it was that he preserved the lives of those that didn't have it in the first place, but they was getting paid for something that they really could not do. All right, so basically that is a culmination of Daniel 1 through Daniel chapter 2, 1 through 35. That's how all that came about. Now we get into verse number 36, which is the interpretation of the dream. Okay, so let's put some stuff on the screen here because I need y'all to see this. Now on this, I've got, again, this is the timeline. This is the timeline. I'm going to read this. Now this is going to get critical. I'm going to slow down a little bit because I need y'all to get this, because this is where we are today. So we have a historical position, we have a present position, and we have a future position. So I want y'all to understand, I have a picture on the screen, and this is the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. That statue is very relevant to where we are right now today, 2021. This is very relevant to that. So we get ready to go down there, and Daniel now is going to explain this, and I want you to pay real close attention when I start and I get down towards the feet, because the feet now, the ankles and the feet and the toes are where we are. Actually, the toes is into the future, but this is where that last week or the 7-day period that I made mention of last week, that's where that comes in at. But before we get there, we're dealing again with the church age, but the church age is around the ankles and the feet part, which is right here on the screen. But we got to get there, okay? So y'all bear with me. All right, so now it says here, let me move this again so y'all can kind of see my face. So y'all can see my face, so I can talk to you a little bit. So Daniel says, okay, verse number 36 in Daniel chapter 2, he says, this was a dream. And now we will interpret it to the king, your majesty. I'm reading out an NIV version, and I'm doing this on purpose because the King James version, a lot of y'all, that's mysterious to a lot of people, so it scares them. They like, I don't understand it. Verse 37. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. Notice here it's little k. It's not big K, King of Kings. It's little k, King of Kings. Now we get ready to go to the head of this gold statue. Let me put this like this. No. Yeah, like that. Okay. So you are the King of Kings. He says, the God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands, he has placed all mankind, and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky, wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. Now he's telling him who he is and where he is on this statue. Now understand this at this point is from us. When we read it, it's historical. But when Daniel was giving the interpretation of the dream, it was future. It was what was to come. Okay? So he's telling them, and Nebuchadnezzar represented Babylon. Babylon was tough. You didn't want to mess with Babylon. However, God was using Nebuchadnezzar. I told y'all last week how, the comparison between Nebuchadnezzar and Trump, how God will use the enemy, if you will, to still get his will done in the earth. Understand again that there were some issues that God had with his people. That's the reason why they went into captivity or into Babylon, into a land that they was never supposed to go in. But they went into that because that they were not obedient. They disobeyed God's laws, his commandments, and his ordinances. And so as a result of that, this was their punishment. So he's telling him here in verse number 38, he says, you are that head of gold. Now, verse number 39, after you, then he says, another king will arise. Now, notice this, because let's go into this. All right, because this getting ready to get on fire, y'all. So he's telling Nebuchadnezzar his dream, and Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and he was the head of gold. So when you look here, the head of gold, Babylon, and that started 606 BC, and he reigned until 539 BC, or Babylon was in power until this particular period of time. Now, this is important, y'all. This is important. Okay, you need to understand this because now you have the head of gold. And I told y'all a couple weeks ago what the stock that y'all put in gold. Okay, I told y'all about the crowns of gold. I'm going to tie all this together by the time we get finished with this series because it's what you put stock in. It's what you value the most. But even in your value system, you will start to see a change in your value system. And the reason why is because God is trying to get your attention, and he's trying to tell you that the house, the money, the Rolex, the Bentley, you've been able to go on all the vacations that you want to, all that stuff, it's going to go away. Hence is the reason why it shows up first at the top of this statue is he has a head of gold. And gold is to be revered. Gold is to be tested. I mean, gold is pure. Gold is what we all go after. But now notice this. The reign of it, he says, is going to come to an end. And he only reigned from 606 until 539 BC. Now notice what happens next. Then the statue shows from the chest and the arms and the hands, it becomes silver. Arms, hands, and chest. Now, the reason why it's silver is because there was somebody else that came in and they took over power. They took over Babylon. Let me. Oh God. Oh Jesus. Jesus, help me, Lord. Help me. Help me. Hit me. Okay. So now listen to this. Listen to this. After verse number 39, after you, meaning King Nebuchadnezzar or Babylon, another kingdom will arise inferior to yours. This is how we start to understand value and the scheme or the plot or the plan of God. Because even the lesson that we can learn from that today is even God is showing in this how he wants you to devalue the things that you put value in. Devalue that. And he's going to show you, because what you have value in, what I'm going to send, it won't hold the same value that you put in it. Now, why is it now that you, as you move down the head, and the head is gold, but yet now silver has less value than gold, but it knocks you off your throne? So now gold is not as precious, as not as prominent, as not as powerful as silver, because now silver comes in and it kicks you off. Why is that? There's a message in here. I'm going to get to it. A kingdom will arise, verse number 39, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom and a bronze. Now, wait a minute, before I get there. Now, notice right here, the silver represents the arms, the hands, and the chest. It is the kingdom now, and I won't get into how this happened. There's a backdrop, because it was something that Nebuchadnezzar did. He took the vessels of the Lord, and when he took the vessels of the Lord, he was not supposed to take that. And so because of that, his punishment was his kingdom would be overthrown. It's always something that we end up doing that demotes us, that puts us in exile, that puts us in prison, that puts us in a strait where God said, no, you got to, we're going to have to deal with this. And so you lose a position that you were supposed to have, and you was never supposed to lose it. So now the Medes now and the Persians. What was the Medes and the Persians? Now the Medes and the Persians were indicative of the arms. You got a left hand. Here's a statue like this. Here's a statue like this. So now you got a left hand, and you got a right hand. You got a left hand and you got a right hand. On the left was the Medes. On the right was the Persians. Those were the hands. Now they joined, they teamed up together. That's how the Babylonians were overthrown. Now, in life and with you, when you look at it, you are always, one side is always more inferior than the other side. Now, me personally, I'm left-handed. So I'm going to use my right hand to do light work. Now, in this particular case, let's just say they like me. So the Medes was less powerful than the Persians. So the right hand was the ones, or the Medes was the ones that came in and they invaded Babylon first, the Babylonians. Then on the left hand was the Persians, which were really strong, much more stronger than the Medes. But at this particular time, they had teamed up and they came in to work as a team, as a tandem to come against Babylon. Okay, and that's how they got overthrown. Now, notice this right here. The Medes and the Persians, they reigned from 539 until 3 BC until 331 BC. Now, notice in my notes here, I've got less value than gold, and it failed because they used the vessels of the Lord. Okay, I said it already. Now, the next one is the bronze. And as we go down, let's look at, can y'all see the statue? Hopefully y'all can see the statue. As you go down, now the scripture talks about the third kingdom. He says after verse number 39, after you, another kingdom will arise inferior to yours. Then it says next, a third kingdom, one of bronze. Stay with me, because we're going to get to the church age where y'all at, or where we at, but you got to understand the history, because the history is going to make all this clear to you. So he says the third kingdom, one of bronze. will rule over the whole earth. Now notice what's going on. We've got the head, which was gold, which was Babylon. Then we got the silver, which was the Medes and the Persians. They all had their time to reign, and they fell off their throne. There was a reason. I ain't got time to get into all that. The third one was the bronze. And so the bronze represented a portion of the belly and the thighs. That was when the Grecian kingdom came into existence or to reign in 331 BC, and they reigned until 146 BC. Now, the bronze is less value than silver. Understand how we keep going down in value, because God is trying to get you to understand that everything that you put stock in, I'm getting ready to come against it. Everything that you believe in, if you ain't gonna believe my word, if you ain't gonna believe my laws, if you ain't gonna obey my statutes and my commandments, what you gonna find out is how you look through life, and you will see how you place value on this, that, and the other, on this man, on this amount of money, and all this stuff. I'm gonna strip you down. I'm gonna strip you down to your bucket naked. I'm gonna put you on a timeline and give you a space or a place to reflect. And after you reflect on this, you're gonna see, man, all that I put value on, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't nothing. Now, notice this. We continue to go down. Now, then it says here, it says, for iron breaks and smashes everything. Ain't that something? How now iron, when you look at it, it's not as precious and as pure as silver or as gold. But I tell you what, it's stronger. It's stronger. So now we talk about something that is less value, but it has more strength. It's less value, but it has more strength. Oh God, I wish that I could preach this. I got a whole nother message to go with this right here, because I want to talk about some things, and as God was showing me how when you look and you think the grass is greener on one side, and God allows something, when you look at it, you say, you mean to tell me my girl is with that now? You mean to tell me she left me for that? And for that right there, they don't even own no house. For that right there, they ain't even got no bank account. You mean for that right there, they can't even take her on vacation. For that right there, oh, I wish I could preach this, but I gotta stay on my timeline. You feel what I'm saying? But I can give you some practical insight into life, because see, a lot of times God will use what you throw away, what you misuse, and he'll show you on the other side that because of how you felt about this, and how you valued that right there, and how you esteemed it and put it in this place because you thought it was all this and such and much, but because of the treatment of it, I'll bring something else along that is less than you, and that will knock you off your throne. So now, wait a minute. I'm meddling now. For iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. That's gold and that's silver. It's going to break all the others. That's kingdoms. Now, verse number 41. Just as you saw, where we at, 33 minutes. Just as you saw that the feet and the toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron. Now we start to get into a mess here. We start to get into a mess because now we're starting to try to mix different I'm trying to, it's not chemicals. What is the I wish my granddaughter was here. She's a scientist. Substances, but it's not substances, but I'm gonna say substance because I can't think of the right word. But you start to mix one substance with another substance, and you're trying to make it one, and you're trying to make it do what you want it to do. He says, "Oh no," he said, "Now we got a problem." But before we explain that, let's look at the Iron Age that I have here. Now notice here with the Iron Age. The Iron Age is indicative of Rome. The Iron Age is indicative of Rome. And it is the partly stomach and or belly, and it is partly part of the I'm sorry. The Iron Age is Rome, and it's the legs. It's the legs. Now, Rome comes into a power after the Grecian kingdom, which fell in 146 BC. Then the Roman Empire, it comes in, or government, comes into power at 146 BC, and it goes through 476 AD. 476 AD. And from there, we get into modern history to where we are today. Modern history to where we are today. So we go from 146 before Christ, and then it lasted, that particular kingdom, because there's the scholars, they argue that the Roman kingdom will come back into power again, and that's going to happen in modernity, or the modern history. That's what modernity means. So you have, they stayed in terms of antiquity from 146 BC until 476 AD. Then after the 476 AD, which speaks of the antiquity, then we move into modern history that brings us up to date. Now, somewhere there's an argument. That's why I got a question mark right there. Rome split. So you have the legs of iron. Rome split somewhere around 300 AD. And it goes from the western to the eastern, but I ain't got time to get into that history lesson right there. All right. So now after that, there's the gap. There's the gap. Let me put this back where y'all can see my face again. Okay. So verse number 41. Just as you saw that the feet and the toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. This will be a divided kingdom. Now, some of that, I can put the splitting of the legs, because that's got something to do with it too. But moreover, what's clear to y'all in this particular presentation is that there was two substances that was being together, which was clay and iron. It says this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with the clay, as the toes were partly iron and partly clay. So this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. This kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. That was verse number 39. Now, I said that because here we're getting ready to get into the part where the church comes in. So we've been talking about these legs, and these legs are indicative of the Iron Age or the Romans. Okay, we talked about antiquity, and we also talked about modernity. Now, with that, we move into a space where we are, because now we get into the toes, we get into the feet. But this right here, this gap, this mystery church age from 476, which was when the Romans ended in power, that was 476 AD. I said 476 AD through 2021, which is the present date where we are right now. So this gap represents the church age. Now, during this church age, we understand that Rome in its former power is no longer there anymore. But it does not mean that that kingdoms have not been set up, or there's not been a different power structures and all that kind of stuff. Because now we go back to modern history where we deal with Hitler and all these different type of things. So we move down on this, and we move down into this area, to this area right here. Now, this is where we come in. So you got this church age, which is the gap, because we still got that 1 week to go, which is 7 years, and that is when the peace treaty starts. But before all that, you get to the 10 toes. And this is some other stuff that I'm going to get into, I think, next week, because now clay and iron which is the feet and the toes, that goes on from 146 AD throughout 476 AD, after the death of Christ. But this now is the antiquity part. But the modern part is from the 476. I keep on repeating myself into the 2021 because of my notes. I don't even need to use no notes. So you got the 10 toes there, if you can see it. Let me put that back to 10 toes so y'all can see that. So you got 10 toes now, and you also, they represent 10 kings, or they represent 10 kingdoms, or they represent 10 heads, because we're going to get into that stuff next week, or they represent the 10 horns. Now, all this is important, y'all. I promise you, this is important, because this is where we are right now. This is moving in the church era or the church age, and it's getting ready to set up the kingdom that's going to take place, or these 10 nations, these 10 kings that are going to be in place before the Antichrist comes about. Now, I want to bring your attention to this, because I need you to understand something. Right now, because a lot of y'all saying, well, how is it that we're going to know on the timeline how things are going to evolve in order for us to get to that last and final week? Well, the scripture tells us, when we read in Matthew, when we read in Thessalonians, when we read in Revelations, it tells us what to look for. And there's certain things to look for that's going to give us indicators of when or right before the signing of the peace treaty, or right before the 7 years are going to come about. So now you have to start looking, and you have to come out of your sleep. So you have to start looking at earthquakes, times of signs of the time. You start looking at all that stuff. So now when we look at where we are in existence today, and all the chaos, all the pestilence, all the plagues, all that stuff, when you start seeing all that, all the shifting in the climate and all that stuff, when you start seeing all that, now you know that on a timeline that you're moving close. When you start hearing about one world order, and you start hearing about one ruler, and you start hearing about NATO and all these different organizations that they're coming together, and as you watch them progress, and then you look and you start counting, and you start to see 10 different kingdoms. When you start to see all that, the formation of all that, then you know the only thing left now is for the Antichrist, which is already here, but he has not shown his face yet. Now he comes out of that. Once he comes out of that, the 10 kingdoms, or the 10 toes, or the 10 horns, they have already been established. Now, next week, we're going to talk about this little horn that grows, and this is a strange, because we get into the beasts, the 4 beasts. And on this Daniel has a vision. Now we're talking about in Daniel 2, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the interpretation. But next week, we're going to move into the vision that Daniel had, and he has a vision about 4 beasts. And this 4th beast was very interesting, because this 4th beast had a horn on it that grew, and it had a face like a man. Now, this particular horn, as it came into power, it knocked off 3 of the other horns, or 3 of the other kings, or 3 of the other kingdoms, or 3 of the other nations. So all this is going to happen right before these nations are going to be set up before the Antichrist comes. And it's on us right now. Let me just finish reading this, and I'm through. I'm at 44 minutes. And verse number 44. In the time of those kings, notice, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Now we're talking about, as we move down the statute, and I told y'all there's going to be something very interesting that happens here, because now we start to look at value, what y'all put all this value in, starting with the gold, moving all the way down to the iron, which is really strong. But there's something that's going to come that ain't going to have no weight, no value to none of that, that's going to knock everything off its rock, or off its seat, off its throne, forever. Watch. In the time of those kings, verse 44, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Now, this is coming down at the feet. Nor will it be left to another people. This is going to be after the 1 week period. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end. But it will itself endure forever. Now watch verse 45. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. This is the work of God. This is the rock that is cut out of the mountain, but God did it. Because God is on his way. God is coming, y'all. The church has got to get ready because there is something that is coming. A rock that broke the iron and the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. It destroyed all of it to pieces. Now, what does that mean? It means that everything that you was convicted by, everything that you put value in, the rock, upon this rock, I'll build my church. The rock, when it came and it shattered. It took away all that. Now we start to move into the last week, and when Jesus is going to come back and he reigns on the earth, this is the second coming of Jesus the Christ. Let me finish this up. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy. Verse number 46. Then watch King Nebuchadnezzar's behavior. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God, big G, of gods, little g, and the Lord of kings, Lord, big L, and of kings, little k, and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all the wise men. Moreover, Daniel, when he got his boys, and Daniel requested, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. What is this saying? It means that the time is going to come when the church is going to be raised up, it's going to be lifted up, and the world is going to see the church in its glory, in its splendor, and they're going to recognize that the God that the church serves is the God of gods, of all things, and the gold ain't gonna matter no more. The silver, the bronze, the brass, none of that stuff. It's not the clay. It's not going to matter anymore. And at that point, then the world is going to give deference and it's going to revere the church. It's going to revere the church, and the church then is going to start to have power. And so God has been talking to me about a evangelism. And when I get finished with this series, I'm going to move into evangelism, because where we are now, y'all, we have got to start evangelizing the world. All right. Next week, we're going to get into the 4 beasts. All this is running parallel. I hope that y'all can see the similarity or the parallelism between last week's message and this week's message. They're all on the timeline. It's still the timeline. I just showed it to you last week in a linear while I drew it out and I gave y'all the spaces and all that. This time I gave you a historical perspective with a present perspective and a future perspective with the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about, and Daniel being able to interpret it. Is still the same thing. It's still dealing with the 70-week period. All right, we're gonna get there. Next week it's gonna get even gooder and gooder and gooder. All right, y'all. It's been a pleasure coming before you I thank you for your time. I love y'all. I appreciate you so much. Remember this, the worst is over. The best is yet to come. Your quality of life is getting better and better and better. And because of that, you are going to live and not die and declare the works and the will of God in Jesus' name. And Fred, I need you right now. Can you take us out of here? Brother Fred. Fred Hammond, take us out. Fred, come on, man. You messing my show up, dude. Fred done messed my thing up. I'm doing a live in Chicago.
I know it was the blood. I know it was the blood. You know it was the blood for me. When
God did that.
He died upon the cross. Know it was the blood for me.
Hey! Yeah!
He's coming back again. Can you say? That wasn't on the song list, but you know, we could just break out at any time and do something else.